Hello and welcome back to the Metanoia Path YouTube channel with me, Matthias Lidborn. Today I want to extend on what I was talking about in my recent YouTube video. And that YouTube video was named How the Unseen Governs the World. So I was reading through Plato's Republic, and which for you who don't know who he is a main influence on the Western civilization. Give us a framework how to think about the invisible things and ethics and morals and so forth. Even though Christianity is the main root and the main influence on the Western civilization, how we know today, but Plato was a very great influence. So I was reading Plato's Republic, and I was reading through. I was beginning to read the first pages of the book 7. So. This book is a philosophical discussion how to create the best state. And Plato was writing down this when his teacher, Socrates, and his companions were discussing this. So Socrates gave this really good illustration and example of how the invisible is the highest, and the highest truth is unseen, and it governs what we see. So it really make you see how the highest truths are unseen and shapes what we see. And this is where many people get confused or make a mistake, is that they take what you see with the eye as the highest truth, and that is the most real thing in the world. But you will see in a second when I read these essential parts of the beginning of book 7, how this relationship between the seen and the unseen highest truth, the higher truths, and so forth. So I have a Swedish translation here, actually, from Plato's Republic. I won't be reading through this here, but I will be reading the essential parts from my computer, actually, because I have it in English here. So this is Socrates that begins this illustration and give this picture of how these realities consists. Imagine human beings living in an underground dwelling, a cave with a long entrance open to the light. They have been there since childhood, chained by the legs and neck, so that they cannot move. They can only look straight ahead, unable to turn their heads. Behind them, a fire burns at a distance, and between the fire and the prisoners runs a raised pathway. Along this path, figures pass by, people carrying statues of men and animals, made of stone and wood and various materials. Some of the figures speak, others are silent. The prisoners cannot see any of this. All they ever see is the shadows cast on the wall in front of them. And if they could talk to each other, they would believe they were naming the things that truly exist. For them, the truth is nothing but the shadows of what is carried behind them. Now imagine what would happen if one of these prisoners were suddenly released. Suppose he was forced to stand up, turn his head, and walk towards the light. The movement would cause him pain, and the brightness would overwhelm his eyes. He wouldn't be able to see the things he used to see the shadows of. And if someone were to tell him that what he saw before was an illusion, that the shadows were not real things, and then showed him the objects being carried behind him, he will be confused. He would believe that the shadows he was used to were more real than the things now being pointed out to him. And if he were forced to look directly at the fire itself, his eyes would hurt even more. He would turn away and retreat back into the shadows, believing them to be clearer and more true than the brighter things now before him. And imagine that this freed prisoner is now forced to leave the cave entirely. Suppose he is dragged up the step and rugged path that leads out into the open air. The light would overwhelm him, and his eyes would not yet be able to see anything of what we call reality. At first, he would only be able to make out shadows again. But no shadows cast by real things outside the cave. After that, he would begin to see reflection in the water of people and objects. Then, as his sight grows stronger, he would finally see the objects themselves. Only after this gradual adjustment would he be able to look up at the sky, first at night seeing the light of the moon and the stars more clearly than the sun. And last of all, he would be able to look upon the sun itself, not as a reflection, but directly in its own place. Then he would understand that the sun is the source, not only of light, but of the seasons, growth, life, and everything the others believed the shadows to be. And if this man were to remember his old life in the cave, the shadows on the wall, the competitions, the honor given to those who could interpret the best, he would no longer envy any of it. He would not desire the praise of those who still believe the shadows are real. And if he were to go back down into the cave, returning to those still in darkness, his eyes would at first be filled with shadows again. Coming suddenly from the light, he would struggle to see what they see so clearly. If he tried to compete with them in recognizing the shadows on the wall, he would seem clumsy and confused. And those still ashamed would laugh at him. They would say his journey upward had ruined his sight, and that it is better not to even think about leaving the cave. And if someone tried to free another prisoner and lead him upward, the others would not only resist, they would kill the one who attempted it. This story is not about the eyes, but about the soul. Education is not the act of giving sight to the blind, but of turning the whole soul away from the world of shadows until it can bear the light of what truly is. The power to see is already within us, but it is pointed in the wrong direction. The soul has to be turned, not filled, so that it can face what is higher and more real. And just as the sun in the visible world gives light and life to everything we see, so the highest realities gives being, order and truth to everything that exists. Only when the soul turns towards the source can it understand anything else. So, hope you could bear with me. My voice is kinda struggling today. As I have mentioned in the podcast, I have a problem with my thyroid, so bear with me. But anyway, I hope you could hear the most of what I said. So the conclusion of this is that what Plato means, or what Plato is showing us here, isn't just a story about some prisoners in a cave, but rather a picture of us and our human condition that shows that most people never see anything else than the shadows. They think that all that appears in front of them is all that there is. And when someone turns to something higher, it really hurts at first. So it's like it feels wrong before it feels true. The highest realities doesn't appear to the senses. They have to be seen by the soul, and the soul has to turn towards them. And that's why the things that actually rule the world is invisible. And that is why the people who live only by what they can see will always mistake illusion from truth. And just like in the cave, when you try to pull people out of the cave, they will resist. Not because that they understand something, but because they are afraid of losing the world that they have built out of appearance. For people don't cling to illusions because they're stupid. No, they cling to it because their identity is built on what they can see and control. And letting go of that feels like a death, a mini death. So Plato's point isn't that most people live in the shadows. It's that the soul has to be reoriented before it can recognize what is real and not real. Because you don't see the higher just because you add more information. You see it by turning away from that in which is lower. And that's why the higher things doesn't appear as obvious. And they don't force themselves upon you. And you rather have to face them before they become visible. And this is actually the part that most people don't really get. That, as I said, that the visible world isn't the source. As you could see in the story that Socrates illustrated, it's rather the result. So the shapes, beliefs, desires, conflicts that people think is real, or should I say reality, think that it is reality. It's just the after image of what is truly real. It's the after image of something higher. And if you don't acknowledge this, you aren't really free. And then in a way you are just like the prisoners in the cave that Socrates was talking about. The prisoners that was arguing about the images of the shadows on the wall. So from this illustration that Socrates gave, Plato also showed in his philosophical system. So what Socrates reveals here is the same thing that almost every spiritual tradition has said, but in a different language. That the soul has to turn to something higher, or it will remain ruled by that it cannot see, even while denying that any higher exists. And this principle you can also see psychologically, because it's like this: every truth, every metaphysical truth is true, and because it's true on every level of reality. So this principle of that you have to turn to something higher to avoid getting ruled by lower parts of yourself and lower parts of reality, it's also true psychologically. And that is, for some of you may have heard, it's very popular nowadays to talk about Jung and especially of shadow and shadow work and so forth. It's the same principle there that Jung laid out, that people don't just live in external shadows, they live in psychological ones. And so the shadow for Jung is where all the repressed materials of your psyche and yourself and everything that you deny about yourself, you're embarrassed about, that you are ashamed of, repulsed of, and so forth. And this principle is true, and that is what Jung said that the shadow contains. And that is the lower parts of the human psyche, of the unconscious. So you can say it's the hidden parts of the self. But as the same for the prisoners in the cave, they are still ruled by these shadows. If you aren't aware of these repressed materials of your psyche and yourself, they will rule you, and they will express themselves in many different kind of ways and will control your instincts and behavior and so on. To circle back to the main topic of the video here, is that what this shows that we heard from Socrates is that reality isn't limited to what we can see, and that the things that shapes us the most is never the things that is right in front of our eyes. They are the things that are beneath, above, and behind what appears. That is meaning, direction, love, conscience, identity, and desire. None of that is visible, yet it governs everything. So modern people think they are rational when they reject the unseen, but they are still ruled by it. They just don't know what they are serving. And when you don't recognize more than just the material world and things, then you start treating them as they are the ultimate. And in a way, they rule the people. And it becomes also a little god to the man that is treating the material things as the highest. And that is how our idol is created. When career, money, power, status, entertainment, politics, sexuality, and you start worshipping yourself and your own material image. And this is how these things become idols. And not just because people worship status, but rather that they build their hope, their identity, and their sense of meaning on things that can be seen, owned, or consumed. And that is what happens when the soul stops looking higher and upward. It's like bowing to everything that eyes can see. And when you don't recognize anything higher than a material world, you start treating things like they are a god, like they are the ultimate. And that's when careers, sexuality, politics, entertainment, status, and even your own self-image becomes an idol. You create an idol for yourself. And not because people bow down to statues and so on. Rather that it's because that their identity and hope and their sense of meaning depends on them. But these things can't carry the weight of the soul. They always collapse under pressure. And that's why it doesn't matter how much you chase these things, you will never arrive. You just keep needing more and more and more, and in the end it will be hollow, so very hollow. And this is how and why something that never was meant to be worshipped as a god or treated as a god will eventually turn against you. And this is where most addictions come from. Is this chasing of something that the material world can't fulfill. And the lower things in the material world is oftentimes connected to desires and compulsions and so forth. So as I said, this is where addiction comes from, and it doesn't matter, it comes in all shapes and forms depending on the individual, like escapism, consumption, obsession, depression, dependency. And this is not only because people are weak, no, but because that nothing in the visible world can satisfy a nature that was made to reach upward. And if you stop aiming higher, you're not free, and you do not become free. It's like you implode in slow motion. And of course, if you have watched this long in this video, you may think, what can I do about this? And how can I avoid to dwell beneath the ground in the cave and only see the shadows, so to say? You can think like this. If the invisible really is that in which is the highest and most real, then the first step is absolutely not to keep on staring even harder at the things that you can see. It is to retrain what you are paying attention to. Because most people don't need more options. Oftentimes the opposite. They don't even need more experience or stimulation, but rather they need orientation. Because the soul has to look upward before it can rise at all. And that can begin in small, concrete ways, like choosing silence before noise, responsibility over distractions, meaning over comfort, and saying no to what is keeping you numb. When you do that, even slightly, something really shifts. You start to get a sense that what you hitherto have perceived as reality and real was only the lower part or a lower part of reality. And here's the real shock, that the things that you thought were yours, like habits, your desires, addictions, and your worldview, were shaping you more than you were choosing them. Because everyone is ruled by something. It's very inevitable. The real question is if it's something higher or something lower. Is a lower part of you controlling the higher parts, or do actually the higher parts of you on your psyche control the lower parts? Have you control over your primitive desires and impulses, or do you let them control you? The modern person thinks that he is free because he have options. But the real freedom starts when you stop worshipping things that are beneath you and start worshipping things and put attention on things that is higher and above you and transcends you. So to turn to what is higher is not just a feeling, it's a choice. And in life, and from a orthodox perspective, it's understanding that every real choice costs something. But most people of today live like grown-up children that are ruled by appetite, lust, impulse, and comfort. And I think most of you understand that you don't rise by just following everything that you happen to want or desire in the moment, because that's not what adults do. That is what children does. Because adults, real adults with integrity, deny themselves things that they could take, that they could do, that they really want to do, but they deny themselves it. And the fun part is that when you deny the things that you would most want, that really benefits you on a very primal level as well, is delayed gratification. That you prolong the time until you can use the thing you want to use or do the thing you want to do. It will give you an even bigger dopamine release. So a real adult deny themselves these immediate lusts and desires and so on, because that they see further than the instant desire. They understand and realize that freedom isn't getting everything you want right now and every other time. It's rather choosing what aligns with what is higher, even at a high cost. In a material sense, in a worldly sense. It's about denying yourself things that could profit you in the short term or in a material sense. But if it doesn't align with the higher values and God's commandments, then you do not choose to go ahead with that decision or making that deal or buying that thing or making this business. If it doesn't align, you don't do it, because the invisible things in this world is more important and more valuable to put attention on and the worldly things. Even if that's very, very hard for a modern person in a civilized society that emphasizes on economic growth. So when people don't see that far ahead, they don't really realize the consequences of their choices, especially if they are driven by the more material things and the form of economics and so forth. They is driven by that, and then also, just to make it worse, they don't manage to control their direct desires, so they may lack impulse control. For taking an example, a very common example is infidelity. In the modern people's thinking, they think that a breakup is just that. It's just a breakup between two individuals. That is something private and even something that their children just will get over. But that's just because people nowadays just see things in fractals, in fragments. They only see the surface and in the moment, or 1 or 2 weeks or 1 year ahead. But in reality, when a father betrays his wife, he don't just crack the relationship between those two individuals, the wife and the husband. He actually fracks a world, the world of the family, the world of the relatives and so on. Because, families splits, loyalties are torn, cousins and grandparents drift away, drift apart, and the extended family dissolves, and the little children inherit confusion as the model of love. And these wounds echoes across generations. So that's why the church fathers, called the devil Diabolos, the one who scatters, breaks apart, fragments. Division isn't just emotional damage, it's ontological decay, and it unravels what was meant to hold together. And the more people live without spiritual sight, the more they accept fragmentation as normal, and they call it freedom, healing, and moving on, because they lost the ability to see beyond the immediate surface. But reality actually holds together by communion, by what unites, that which binds, that which is the binding factor that is above everything else and binds everything together. That's the uniting part. That's the Godhead, so to say. Because God creates and the devil divides. So to follow what is higher is always to follow that in which is binding, that binds families together, generations, meaning, worship, love. And on the other hand, to follow what is lower is to dissolve everything to pieces. So that which fragments, stay away from that. That which binds, follow that. Everything that binds in love, in communion. And you can see this in yourself, in your psyche as well. Everything that's fragmenting inside of you, every conflict you have inside of you. If you follow that, it will fragment even more. But when you follow that in which will make you more whole, psychologically speaking, is that you should follow. Because inside yourself, you have a lot of different desires. It's like many different small gods in yourself that control you. Oh, I want this and I want that. But they are in conflict. And then you have to resolve this. Maybe you have to lower this part and higher this part so they can come in communion. And then you can see this in yourself, as I said, as a microcosm. But then on a macro scale, you can see it in your community, or you can see it in your family, your community, in your country, and so on and so on. And then you can take the whole world into scale. But for a human being, we should focus on that which is closest to us. So in the Orthodox tradition, we speak about ascesis, not as a punishment, but as a purification. Because when the soul is clogged with noise, comfort, vanity, and appetite, its eye, the nous, then can't see what is true, because it's clogged. And if you can't see, you can't orient yourself. And you know, a dirty lens doesn't stop light from existing. It's just that you don't see it when you have a dirty lens. And when all the dirt is on your lens, on your nous, you won't recognize what is true because you can't see it. But the more you purify your heart, the more clear you can see spiritual things and higher meaning in the world. But you know, none of this is climbed alone. In the Orthodox life, you don't save yourself by sheer will, because grace meets you when you turn even slightly towards the highest. You fast, you struggle, you repent, not to impress God, but to clear the rust from the mirror of your soul, so truth can be seen again. And the more the nous is purified, the more reality come into view, and not just ideas, but God, the source of being itself. That is when the invisible stops being a theory and rather becomes the ground you stand on. So as I said, the way out isn't to stare harder at the shadows. It's by turning your face to what is above you. It's to turn your face up to heaven and to accept that the climb will cost you. The climbing of this ladder will cost you. Because everything you don't do to do another thing is the offering for what you do. But in the end, what this gives back is a wholesome life, a life in harmony, not an easier life, rather a harder life in many ways, but you will be more content, you will feel harmony. And with God's grace, you will experience things that you never experienced before. You do the right, not the things that feel right or what you desire. You do what's right. So what this really does is it gives everything that the shadows never could give, like clarity, integrity, and a soul that finally can see. You see reality for what it really is. And you won't go in an endless circle of living. You will aim upwards and you will transcend, hopefully. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I really hope this doesn't go over people's heads and is too much at the same time. And I know my voice isn't the best. I have, as I said, problem with my voice from a couple of years ago. And the last year has been quite bad, but there is some progression. So if you would like, I could put up a video with another voice, with the AI voice on the reading from the book. Yeah, if there's some interest in that. But if not, I hope my voice was enough. So don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. I would really appreciate it if you subscribe if you don't do it right now. So go ahead and like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And also share it if you feel it could be of value of your friends and family or something like that. And if you need a coach, go ahead and visit my website, mattiaslidborn.com, or you just send me an email and tell me what you would like me to coach you on, and I will reply to you and we can make a custom deal. I offer training plans, diet plans, and talk therapy and coaching. So you can clean yourself, you can clean your heart, and you can excel in the things that you want to excel. And this we do through habits and routines and discipline. And so you can live a fuller, greater life with purpose and consistency. And yeah, don't forget to watch my podcast, the Metanoia Path podcast. If you haven't watched that then, I really recommend you watch it. And I have had some really interesting guests that give really fruitful advice and show a way of living that is very meaningful. Anyway, I thank you very much for tuning in today, and I really hope I will see you in the next video. So until then, have a nice day and goodbye.